would like to thank everyone for coming out on this cold April afternoon to help us remember one of our very own fallen heroes, Officer Ken Novak. Thank you to Mayor Idem for being here, for your continued support to the Lansing Police Department. I would also like to thank our elected officials for being here and sharing in this special day of remembrance. Finally, we are especially thankful for all our honored guests for taking the time to come and remember Kenny. From our retired officers to our dispatchers and to the family of Ken Novak, thank you for being here today. We have one special guest who was not able to attend today, but to Mr. Ken Novak Sr., I know you're listening at home. We want to thank you for the ultimate sacrifice that your son made. You and your wife have remained a part of LPD family through the years and will always have a special place in our hearts. Father Bill.
And we'll say a prayer for Ken. Dear God in heaven, we have come here today to remember Kenny Novak on the anniversary of his death. He was one of the finest who served you by serving his community, first as a police cadet, then as a full-time dispatcher, a paramedic, and as a police officer. His life was given in protection of this community, so may he now enjoy eternal life with you. Watch over his brothers and sisters in the Lansing Police Department. Bless all firefighters, police officers, dispatchers, and paramedics. Protect them as they serve and protect your family here on earth. Bless Kenny's family. And finally, bless all of us who honor his memory on this day. Amen.
On April 8, 1992, Officer Ken Novak was shot and killed in the line of duty. He was investigating a suspicious vehicle at 172nd Street and Oak Avenue. At 10 p.m., Officer Novak had approached the vehicle and questioned its female occupant, who provided false identification. After returning to his squad car, a male subject emerged from a nearby wooded area and began firing 6 shots, wounding both Officer Novak and another officer. The other officer was able to return fire and killed the male suspect instantly. Officer Novak was transported to the Community Munster Hospital, where he was ultimately succumbed to his wounds. The male suspect, who was under house arrest for aggravated battery, had stolen a car and fled from the Indianapolis with his female accomplice. She was later found guilty of attempted murder of the wounded officer and sentenced to 27 years in prison, but was found not guilty on the first-degree murder of Officer Novak. Officer Novak had served the Lansing Police Department for over 8 years, beginning as a police cadet in December of 1983, before becoming a part-time officer in April of 1986. He served as a full-time dispatcher, a certified paramedic with the department. Officer Novak was survived by his parents and his sister Kathy. I believe that it is important to tell this story. It serves as a reminder to all that our lives can change in the blink of an eye. There is no such thing as a routine call. Today marks the 30th anniversary of the tragic loss of Officer Ken Novak. This will be the first year that no active Lansing police officer remains on the force who had the honor to work alongside Kenny. That is why it is so important to have our retired officers here today to help us keep his memory alive. As I look around, I see so many familiar faces that bring back so many memories. It reminds me that we truly are all family. Some of you have been retired longer than some of our new officers have been alive. Yet you all came back here to honor a fallen brother. We all know the risks when we take this job. There is no greater profession where someone will run toward the sound of gunfire and is willing to lay down their life for a stranger. When we are young, we think we are invincible, and that is the type of thing that this type of thing could never happen to us. Kenny's death remains a constant reminder that we must always remain vigilant, cherish what we have in life, and live every day like it could be our last. Well, time has passed, Kenny remains in the hearts and minds of the Lansing Police Department and the village of Lansing. All of us are reminded of the sacrifice Kenny made each time we visit the police department and as we pass by the many reminders throughout our facility. To Mr. and Mrs. Novak and Ken's sister Kathy, we thank you for bringing Kenny to us. He chose a noble profession and made the most of his 27 years. Mr. Novak recently told me that when he learned of Kenny's death, they were hurting as a family and they lost a son. However, he did not realize that the police department was hurting too. They had lost a brother. Even though I never had the pleasure of working with Kenny, he will always be a brother to me.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is tough stuff, huh? Especially thanks to everyone for being here on such a cold, yucky day. I know the Novak family really appreciates your presence here today. I am privileged to be part of this observance to honor Kenny on the 30th year of his death. We are here today to make sure that our hero, Kenneth R. Novak Jr., is remembered and honored, and to remind those that loved him that his life and memory continues on in the hearts of all of us. Kenny continues to inspire many of us. His passion to help others and serve and protect his community are goals that many of us strive for yet today. The words above and beyond are not enough to describe Kenny's drive to be a model police cadet, a police dispatcher, a paramedic, and his dream of being a police officer. In his short 27 years, he helped and encouraged so many to never stop working towards what you believe in. The Novak family and the Item family were friends before that tragic day in 1992. Kenny was our friend, our comrade, and also our dog and house sitter. So we got to know his folks and his sister. Even as a Lansing police cadet, he was willing to help his new friends at the Lansing Police Department in any way he could. After April 8th, 1992, our families had even more in common. We had both lost a child much too soon. Kenny became a Lansing Special Police Officer in 1986, the year we lost our daughter. This year, Kenny would be turning 57, Leslie would be 52. I'm sharing this with all of you because Bud and our family have learned that it is extremely rare for a couple or a family or even an organization or a community to survive the tragic loss of a young person without separations, breakups, and drastic lifestyle changes. Both our families have seen those sad results in other families and communities. In conversations with Kenny's family, I am certain that part of the reason they have remained strong is because of the ultimate support they have experienced here in Lansing. I am very thankful that every day the Lansing Police Department family, including all the retirees and the village of Lansing, continue to watch over and love the Novak family. I know how important that support is to Ken and Pat and Kathy and her family. Much more importantly, as I am, I hope that all of you are forever grateful that the Novak family to this day continues to support and love all of us. They are our police department and our first responders' biggest fans, and they continue to promote and support those of us trying to make Lansing the best that it can be each day. Rest in peace, Kenny. God bless you and your beautiful family.
For those of you who don't know me, I am Scott Musser. I was number 255. I retired a long time ago. Chief and D.C. Roberts asked me to say a little about Kenny's life and his life here. January 17th, 1965, April 8th, 1992. They say your life is just two dates separated by a dash. It's up to you to make the most of your dash. Kenny made the most of his, mostly through his enthusiasm and his dedication he had for everything he did. He always wanted to be the police. I've heard tales from Mom. When he was a youngster, he used to ride around on his bike, and he'd make siren noises and pull over the other kids and write them tickets. Shortly after he turned 16, he got to be a police cadet. After his initial training, he rode with officers, and he learned everything he could. He picked several officers, there was 4 or 5 of us, and he rode with us all the time. He used his knowledge to compete in several national competitions along with his fellow cadets. Lansing was always well represented at these events and always did very well. As a dispatcher, he absorbed all the knowledge and information he could. He became the kind of dispatcher that knew what you wanted before you did. He would have everything you needed as soon as it became available, and you would have it, and he wanted to make sure that his officers were going to go home safe and they had everything they needed to get the job done. He went to EMT school, soon began responding to calls off duty on the pager system. Now, he wasn't just the police, he liked to do other things too. He had lots of interests. He loved to play guitar, sing, and write music. There used to be a tape of his music in dispatch. I don't know if it's still there or not. It's been a long time. He loved to go fishing. He also loved trains. Not the tabletop ones, although he had a collection of those. He loved the big trains. He and his friends would go out to the train yards and the trestles, and they would videotape the trains going by, and he would narrate the tapes. Like the mayor mentioned, he was a great house sitter and great dog sitter. He helped out many of the officers, and there was many times you'd see him riding around town with a dog in his car that wasn't his. I think there's a couple of summers he didn't go home at all. He was very proud to become a paramedic. His skill, compassion, and empathy gave proof of his dedication and the love of his job. He used to respond to his calls in this old gold Oldsmobile. I think it was Grandma's. Until he drowned it responding to an electrocution call during a storm and the streets were flooded. He replaced that Oldsmobile with a refurbished, retired squad car, an old Dodge Diplomat. It became known as the PMC, or paramedic call. I think even the general community would see it driving around and know it was him. At age 21, Kenny realized his dream, became a special police officer. Kept up his training and riding as much as possible. He really loved being the police, but he liked to have fun at it too. I've always had kind of a dry, sometimes dark sense of humor. He was my ultimate straight man. There's a couple of incidents that still make me chuckle. There was a loud music call, a dog call that ended up with him getting a dog, Ellie, short for 1011, and an alarm call with a run-in with a 6-foot cardboard cutout of Mr. Goodwrench, which he never let me live down. Then there was the 2 a.m. med call when he was riding with me on a warm summer night. It was at one of our local hotel or apartment buildings, used to be a hotel, 1 story, and it was set up in a U shape, and it was door, window, window, door, corner, and our paramedic call was in the corner apartment. Knocked on the door, subject inside said he'd fallen, he couldn't get up, couldn't unlock the door. So we're discussing how we're going to get in, and he looks at the window and says, "This window's open. I think if I can get the screen out, I can get in there and I'll get to him." Okay, cool. So we get the screen out for Ken. He goes in, and it's myself, Sergeant Klain, who was our supervisor, and my wife, who was the ambulance driver. We're all standing there, storm door open, waiting for this door to open, and we're waiting a long time. It seemed like 10 minutes, but it was probably 2. From behind us, we hear, "Psst." We all turn around and look. There's Ken at the next apartment going, "Wrong apartment." And it's a good thing nobody's home because I stepped on the pillow on the bed when I went through the door. Great. So we ended up making entry into the apartment, took the patient to the hospital. He was fine. Kenny finally became car qualified, and he would go out at every opportunity, and he would go to every single call he could. He went to so many calls, he earned the nickname of Captain America because he was everywhere. As time went on, he became a little less of a student, more of a trainer mentor. He would help new officers and cadets getting off the right foot. When another dispatcher was going through EMT school, he made himself available to her to help as often as he could. Little did he know he would be her first med call. For all you new guys, and that's everybody on the department now, I believe a little bit of Kenny still rides with each and every one of you. When you're out doing something and you get that little knock in the back of your head that says, "Hey, stupid, don't do that," that's Kenny. Pay attention and never forget. Thank you.
My dad couldn't be here today, so I am honored to be able to read the words that he has written for all of you to hear. It's been 30 years, and once again, the memories of the events of the night of April 8th, 1992 are brought to the forefront of our thoughts. While this date has been held in honor every year, this year is different in that today, those who were there that night have been given the opportunity to be together again. Our memories and thoughts of that night are not held in check and confined to this date, and for me, they come often. I'd like to share some of mine with you. Kenny enjoyed life and lived it to the fullest. His story and the history of his dream to become a cop have been told many times. The efforts he put into trying to reach his goal earned him the respect of all who knew him. He considered it an honor to wear every uniform and patch that he earned. In becoming a dispatcher, a state-certified paramedic, and a special police officer, his top priority became serving the Lansing Police Department and the citizens that they protect above all else. What is probably lesser known about him is his willingness to share his knowledge with those who asked for his advice. He was trusted, his advice was appreciated, and a few have told me that he helped them along in their chosen careers and consider him a role model. He also encouraged some that he recognized as having the talent to consider becoming paramedics. Kenny had earned and found a new home with the family he chose. Not much is known about the history of Officer George Dragisevich. It seems he values his privacy. I find him to be a very humble man. For a couple of years, as I write my memories on Facebook, I think I kind of tried hard to honor his privacy because after he left LPD and went on to his new career, he told me that none of his new coworkers knew what he had gone through. I find George to be one heck of a nice guy, an above-average family man, and a great judge of character for choosing Dawn as a lifelong partner, who lived with him and helped him through a very difficult time. While no man is perfect, the only flaw that I can find in George is that he's a Minnesota Twins fan. The night of April 8th, 1992 stands alone in our memories because of the number of lives that were impacted on that date. While Kenny and George were most affected by the events of that night, there were many who were forced to work under emotions that were never felt before. You can train a person to do a job, but there's no way to train them to do a job while experiencing anger or grief. These were the people who would soon become very important to me, Pat, and Kathy. George had acted way beyond the call that night. He undoubtedly stopped an evil man from leaving the scene and harming other people. In doing so, it was he who began my healing process. He was probably in surgery when I found out that Kenny didn't make it. When I asked Chief Dean Stanley if they got the guy who did it, he responded, "He went to hell before your son went to heaven." Anger was eliminated from the emotions that I would deal with in the days to come. Early the next morning, Sergeant Jack Spargo came to our house to discuss funeral arrangements. At that time, I knew I lost a son, but I had not yet realized that Lansing lost a cop. I turned down the pipes, the gun salute, and taps, thinking of my civilian family's emotions. I also chose a small funeral home and church. Jack honored my wishes, and Peter Krilich handled the logistics. Jack would continue to stop by from time to time just to check on our emotions. He became a dear friend, and he and Pete are missed. It was later that day, Pat and I had just returned from the cemetery from picking out a gravesite when I became aware that the Lansing Police Department lost one of their own. We were still in our driveway when a police car pulled up behind us. The officer got out with tears in his eyes. He hugged us, offered his condolences, got back in his car, and went back on the streets. Throughout that day, many Lansing officers came to our house to offer help and show their support. The next day, the wake. I didn't know many of the Lansing officers personally, but through their actions, the honor guard, the walkthrough, and brief conversations that I had with some, I began to feel a closeness to them. They were all hurting, but some showed strength while others let their grief show a little. It was then that I realized that I was not in this alone, and I was able to give pity rather than drown in it. Over the next few weeks, we got to know each other better, and it was during this time that I began to feel that I was part of the LPD family. For 17 years, I had cause to walk the halls of 2710 East 170th Street. At first, those halls and offices were alive with familiar and friendly faces. They were a comfort to me. In later years, a cash shortage mandated a cutback in police personnel. The guys that were there that night were offered an early retirement incentive, and they began to leave the force. Soon, those halls and offices became quiet and empty. The streets were the priority. In 2014, the Village of Lansing decided to design the village sticker for that year to honor the Lansing PD. It was Kenny's old friend, and at that time, Police Chief Dennis Murrin Jr., who requested that Kenny's star number 612 be incorporated into that design. This allowed my imagination to kick in. With every car in Lansing displaying that sticker, I kind of felt that Kenny was on the street again. The day came when Chief Murrin was the last officer left who wore the badge and the uniform on that night in 1992. Now, when an officer loses his life while on duty, invariably someone will invoke the request for the fallen to continue to watch over them. One day I sat across the desk from the chief, and it was like I could feel Kenny standing behind his left shoulder. Imagination, sentimentality, or just maybe. It is ironic that 3 of Kenny's best friends were the last to take off the badge and never wear the uniform again. On December 14th, 2020, Officer Gabe Barajas, number 269, retired as a special police officer. On December 15th, 2020, Scott Musser, number 255, turned out the lights, closed and locked the door, and retired, having the distinction of being the last person to ever serve as a police special officer. On January 23rd, 2021, Dennis Murrin Jr., number 272, retired as Chief of Police. This left me with a deep feeling of melancholy. I could close my eyes and only picture an empty police station, and I allowed myself to wonder, where's Kenny? Is he still there? Or has he retired and gone on to join those officers that he knew and who had passed on within the past 29 years? The answer soon came to us. Chief Al Phillips came to our house one day and told us that out of respect for Kenny, Mr. Mark Watkins and his crew from Mark IV Landscaping had done a complete cleanup and renovation of the site you stand on today. He came bearing gifts which I presume were issued to Lansing police officers. The travel cup and the vinyl cover of the screen cleaning cloth both have the monogram of a star bearing the number 612. I recently received a challenge coin with the number 612 die cast in the tip of the star. This, I believe, is also issued to all active police officers, and part of the rules of having a challenge coin is it must be carried at all times. Every time an officer looks at one of these items, it's possible that number 612 will remind them that the most innocent-looking situation can turn deadly in a heartbeat. Yes, Kenny is still watching over the Lansing police officers. You are gathered here today thanks to the ideas and efforts of Chief Al Phillips. My thanks go out to him for thinking of me and having the Lansing News Network, LNN Channel 4, use their skills and talents to allow me to join you in real time. My thanks go out to them for their efforts. I was asked by Chief Phillips if I wanted to speak, and I said no, I would just be happy reading my dad's words, but something happened this morning that I want to share with you all. Every anniversary, my mom, myself, and if either of my kids can make it, we do what we call the rounds. And we go to the cemetery, we go to the police station, we come here, we go to a couple places in Lansing where trees have been planted in Kenny's honor, and we go to the museum. This morning, my mom and I and my son, who's 22 and he's autistic, went to the police department, and we went inside, and he reads the inscription on the memorial wall there. And we get back out up to the car, and I had the radio on, I had it turned down. And I remarked to my mom, it's not as bad out here as I thought it was going to be weather-wise. And I looked up and I said, you know what, Butch, because that was his nickname, that's what I called him. I said, if you have any pull up there, keep this weather going good for this afternoon. We get in the car. I start to turn on to 170th Street, and my son says, turn it up, please. So I turned up the music, thinking he wanted to listen to music, and it was Styx, Come Sail Away. Now, for any of those who have seen the funeral video that was produced after Kenny's funeral, they had a part in the video where the police procession went past the police station on that very spot where I was turning out, and Come Sail Away was the music that was playing in the background on that video. So I actually welled up with tears, and I looked at my mom, I said, wow. We came here, got out again. My son read the sign, got back in the car. A Def Leppard song was on the radio. My son said, "Turn it down, please." I have to believe that my brother was telling me, "I heard you, sis." And I have to believe that the cold and the rain is him going, "I heard you, but I'm not going to listen to what you want because, we're brother and sister, and that's how brother and sister are." And one more thing. At my parents' house, before we came here, I glanced in their backyard, and I did see a cardinal out there. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that a cardinal coming is somebody from the past coming to visit. And they don't have cardinals in their backyard very often. So that just made me feel like, again, he's here knowing what's going on and visiting us today.
Kathy, thank you very much. Gabe? We have one final guest that I think it deserves a chance to say a few words. Sergeant Gabe Brajas.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I'm a retired police sergeant, retired in 2018. For those that do know me, I'll keep it short, I promise. Not gonna have it. Right? I didn't know if I wanted to speak today, but there's things I just want to get off my chest, and just memories of Kenny. When I first started here in April of 1990, 2 years before Kenny passed, I came here as a young officer, and the department looked a lot different. It was a lot of veterans and just a few new guys, right? Quite different than today. And I got to know Kenny right away. We became friends. He was a dispatcher, a police officer. He was always working, right? Either dispatching or on the street. And that's where we crossed paths a lot. He seemed to be working a lot of shifts that I worked as well. And anytime I had being new and having problems or trying to figure out solutions or whatever I was dealing with, I'd rather go to Kenny, because he was very experienced in my opinion, and I'd go to him instead of some of the grumpy vets instead, right? It was just easier that way for me. And as time went by, initially, like I said, he was a mentor to me. But then as time went by, I mean, we became friends, and he dragged me out, and we went fishing several times with some of the other guys, the likes of George and Bean as well. And we had a lot of fun, and we started practicing a lot of softball. Kenny wanted to start a softball team here. And on April 8th, 30 years ago, I had gone up the street to Sport Mart here on Torrance, and I picked up a new softball mitt. And I ran to the station. There were no computers back then. There were no cell phones, so you had to go take a look at the hard copy of the schedule. And I stopped off at the station, and as I left, I looked over by the gas pump, and I saw Kenny's squad car, and Kenny's fueling up his squad. It was towards the end of the night, towards the end of his shift, and he grabbed some gas before making a couple last rounds through the village. And we got to talking and laughing and joking it up and stuff. And he was happy, smiling, because I finally got a new mitt, because the one I had was really old. And we said our goodbyes. I didn't know then that was the last time I was going to see him. He probably passed away within a half an hour of that. And I missed him all these years. And when I would work, he was always present near me. I could feel it. And many times on midnights when things would slow down and things would get quiet, things get lonely out there, I look up into the night sky, and I talk to Kenny. He talked back to me. I could feel his presence. I know that he always watched my six. He was always there. The many times in my career, with all the crazy stuff I'd get into, I know that when the hair stood up on my neck, that it was Kenny saying, "Gabe 269, be careful." And one of the things that saddens me as well, like I said, is that become friends. We're getting close. I know that he would have been one of my lifelong best friends, and he would have been close to my family too. And over the years, I've talked to my two daughters about Kenny and all the good things that he represented and all the experience he had. And it just saddens me that my kids never got a chance to see him and meet him and know the great cop that he was, and even more importantly, to realize that he was such a wonderful human being. A loving person. He knew how to deal with people, and very empathetic whenever he dealt with anybody on the street. And finally, like I said, I know that he rolled with me all my career, and I know he's present today because of a little sign when I saw Kathy earlier. See, when I first started here, thinking that the guys up in dispatch could never would remember my name, I would always say, when I called up there, I'd say, it's Gabe 269. And he thought it was funny, and he ran with it. And every time I called up there, he's like, hey, Gabe 269. Or even in person, we meet out and about, and he's, hi, Gabe 269. And I hadn't heard it for so long. And this afternoon, just a couple hours ago, I was in front of the house taking the garbage cans in, and I saw a car, I didn't recognize it. Kathy pulls up, she rolls the window down, stops, and the first things out of her mouth are, hi, Gabe 269. Thank you.
Today we remember Kenny, and we remember all the people that worked with him. We thank God for all of you, and thank God for his life. As somebody said, he gave it all in 27 years. It's obvious that many people miss him, and obvious that he was a great young man. Today we ask God to watch over him, his family, and the Lansing Police Department and the people from the Lansing, and we ask him to watch over our town, watch over all the people that live here, and especially watch over the police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and dispatchers that work for this wonderful, great community. May Almighty God bless all of you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Mr. Novak Sr., you finally get your bagpipes.